o'clock, so we will get underway. And I will open this meeting of the City of Sandy Planning Commission. This is Monday, July 27, 2020. Opening the meeting at 7 p.m. And for the record, this meeting is being done via Zoom video conference platform. So we will begin with a roll call.
Okay, Commissioner Carlton,
Here.
Commissioner Lasowski,
Here.
Commissioner McLean-Wenzel,
Here.
Commissioner Logan,
Here.
Commissioner Mobley,
Here.
Commissioner Mayton,
Here.
and Chairman Crosby.
Here. We've got everybody here. Great. In our packet were the minutes from our last meeting, the 30th of June, 2020. Any corrections, changes, additions that anybody spotted that you want to mention? If not, we'll go to a motion.
Hey, Chair, I'll go ahead and put a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the last Planning Commission meeting. And Jude?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Chris, seconded by Don to approve the minutes of June 30, 2020. Now, how do we do this last time? All in favor say aye, and if you're not, we'll, all in favor say aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Yeah, fingers up. Okay. Motion carries. Before we go to the normal requests from the floor, I've got two little things to add. First of all, to anybody in the public, whether here audio or video or both, who may be thinking that the Bull Run Terrace application is going to be reviewed tonight, it will not be. That hearing has been moved to August 24th. Same time, probably the same platform. So we will not be taking any public comment on the Bull Run Terrace application tonight because it is not on our agenda. Keep watching the city website for any changes, but as far as we know, it will be on the agenda next month. And then one other little point of business for just us commissioners. From some of you suggested and talked to Kelly, and we're going to kind of do a little flip-flop on our agenda starting next month. And what has normally come at the end where it says items from commission and staff, and you know that normally comes when we're halfway out the door and our minds have already checked out, and we try and we want to hurry and be gone. So to give that a little bit more of our alertness and attention, we're going to be adding that or moving that to just after. This is, I'm suggesting that we do it just after we do the request from the floor and before we get into any new business. That'll be the staff or the planning director report and issues that we're thinking about, that we're concerned about, just kind of a general time. We're just a little bit more alert and maybe wanting to talk and discuss it earlier in our agenda than after 10 o'clock. Is that okay with y'all? It's not
good.
Taking it off the agenda, it's just moving it, bringing it up earlier. And that will be, we'll introduce that next month so that it gets on. We didn't decide that in time to get it on the agenda today.
Chair, if I can just make a comment. I'm not against it. I would just make people aware that if we do that, we might be making the public presentations later into the evening, and they may be more of an inconvenience for them as well. So just something to consider.
Yeah, my thought was that we would limit our time. It would not be an open-ended talk forever. It'll, I don't know, we can do it a few times and see if we want to limit ourselves to 5 minutes, 10 minutes or something like that. So it won't, I'll try and keep it to not be a free for all so that we can move on. But that's a good point.
Just to emphasize for Jerry, I was one of the instigators of that idea, Chris. And in general, there is the thought of the end versus the beginning. But if you look at what we have on the agenda, there's an opportunity for the public to talk to the commission. There's an opportunity, obviously, to do the agenda. And at the end, there's an opportunity for staff to tell us, what they want to tell us. There's absolutely no place on the agenda for the commission, or if a commissioner has something they want to talk about that's not on the agenda, to be able to do that. That might want to say something. We're kind of like the only ones left out if you think about it. So it isn't meant to be an extensive thing. If I would say leave it to Kelly. If something's extensive, we would go ahead and set it up as a work set item. But I think it's an opportunity to just include the opportunity for commission members to bring up whatever they might want to bring up, no different than the public bringing up whatever they want to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
No, I appreciate it. I just want to make sure everybody, when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, that's a great idea. We get to talk and bring up some things ourselves. But then I got to thinking about my last, maybe year and a half, and some of the late nights, I didn't want to see our public having to be presenting at 11 p.m. or 10:30 p.m. On a new business proposal. They want to be sharp too. So I want to be respectful of their time since I am volunteering mine. So that's all.
Oh, good point. And we need to keep that in mind as we share. But like Don says, it may not amount to much time, and it may just be introducing something that would turn into a work session or something like that.
Jerry, if I may, maybe a compromise to it is to limit it to 15, 20 minutes, whatever is deemed appropriate. And if there is something that's hot that night to talk about, then we could carry it over to after the public portion of it. Just a suggestion, if there's something that we can't get done in the prescribed time frame. So we could give the public a time certain to start on, at least for the first agenda item.
Yeah, or we could either put it off to the end, or we could waive it for the evening too. If we kind of anticipated that it would be going long, and maybe just do Kelly's report and just do that and go on. We'll be playing it by ear.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think that it has to be late. Given my time on the commission, generally, 7 to 9 pretty much has been the length of time. We sometimes go to 9:30. It's been very unusual and infrequent that we, have these 10 or 11 o'clock things. So I think as a rule, the 9 o'clock is usually about the time we've been done. We've had some controversial stuff lately, so that's taken up more time because there's been more testimony, like with Bailey Meadows.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for that little discussion. We'll move on now to the time when we give on each of our meetings opportunity for citizen communication on non-agenda items. If you are participating tonight, either on the phone or via Zoom, this is the time when we'd have you'd be able to just speak to the Planning Commission on a topic that's not on tonight's agenda. And before you do that, before anybody does, let me give you some instructions about how to give testimony. In this part, if you want to participate, if you're on Zoom, down near the bottom there, I believe it's at the bottom, there's a raise hand button. And you would click that and wait to be recognized. Kelly is the one who will recognize you. And if you're participating via telephone, all you do is dial *9 to quote unquote raise your hand and then wait to be recognized. If you choose to submit written testimony, please send it to planning, PLANNING, at ci.sandy.or.us as soon as possible. Needs to be in during the meeting time. And thank you for your flexibility during the COVID-19 public health emergency. If you have any questions about any of these procedures, you can call City Hall. That number is 503-668-5533. And I will go over those little instructions about giving testimony during the public hearings as well. So and I can't tell, or we can't tell looking at the screen, who might be public and who might not. Kelly is the one that sees the raised hands. So is there anyone have any just general communication to the Planning Commission tonight? Raise your hand.
Chair, I would just add, you got to be in the participant list in order to raise your hand, just as a technical note.
Well, if you're on the phone though, does that show up?
Oh, no, just for the Zoom users. I'm sorry. I should have specified.
Yeah. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. All right. We have 2 public hearings tonight, and we will move right into the first one. We'll open this public hearing at 7:12 p.m. This is file 20-015, conditional use permit, variance and design review, referred to as the Sandy Feeder Reinforcement Project. Any abstentions from any hearing, any commissioner tonight on this? Okay, nothing seen or heard. Any conflicts of interest to declare? Okay, nothing seen or heard. Any ex parte contact? Okay, nothing heard. All right, if you testify, you must raise all issues you wish to address at this hearing. If your issue is not raised at this hearing, it cannot be raised later in any appeal. Your comments should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include your proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. Because this is the initial evidentiary hearing, state law grants any party the right to request a continuance of this hearing or ask that the record remain open after the hearing is closed. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Staff report.
Hey everyone. I have my fan on right next to me. Is it loud?
Can't even hear it.
Okay, perfect. I didn't know when I moved out here that nobody in the Pacific Northwest believes in air conditioning. So, fan right next to me. Okay. So this is for the Sandy Feeder Reinforcement Project, which is a gas regulator station. This is the vicinity map. The proposed area is on University Avenue, just north of Highway 26. These are a couple of pictures of the site. This is looking at it from the west, the southwest, and the northwest. The applicant for this project is Northwest Natural Gas. They're wanting to construct a natural gas regulator station. Natural gas runs through pressurized distribution lines, and eventually that natural gas needs to become depressurized in order to serve customers. So that's what the gas regulator station does, is it depressurizes, reduces the pressure of natural gas running through those distribution lines. So this application, the reason why it's coming to Planning Commission is because it's a Type 3 design review, a Type 3 conditional use permit, and a Type 3 special variance. This is the picture that the applicant supplied to us of what the gas regulator station would look like. So you'll notice that it's not a building, that it's a utility station. This is the site plan. I didn't include what the numbers reference because that would have made it too small. But I'll let Brad explain kind of what's going on in this site plan. It's surrounded by a fence. There's a 10 by 20 paved parking area, and then the different utility structures that are part of the regulator station. So for the code review, the area is zoned as C2 general commercial, and the staff determined that this qualifies as a major public facility under conditional uses and is therefore a conditional use permit. A number of the development requirements in the general commercial chapter can't be met because of the type of development. It's not a building. And therefore we determined that it requires a Type 3 special variance, which I'll talk about. So because it doesn't include a building, the applicant is requesting a special variance to the design standards found in the general commercial chapter as well as the design standards chapter. I listed out a few of the specific sections in the design standards chapter that are not applicable to this project. So materials, facades, and colors, roof pitch, materials, and parapets, the requirement that a building has to be facing a public streets, the requirement that at least 30% of the ground floor elevation has to be windows, and the requirement for civic space. So the code language says that the Planning Commission may grant a special variance waiving a specified provision under the Type 3 procedure if it finds that the provision is unreasonable and unwarranted due to the specific nature of the proposed development. Under the conditional uses chapter 17.68, there are 6 things that the Planning Commission needs to take into account to determine if the proposed development qualifies as a conditional use. The first one is that it has to be listed as either a minor conditional use or a conditional use in the underlying zoning district, which we've determined that it is a conditional use in the general commercial zoning district. The characteristics of the site are suitable for the proposed use considering the size, shape, location, topography, and natural features. There are no natural features on the site. It's flat, and it has enough area for the regulator station as well as required improvements. Number 3, the proposed use is timely considering the adequacy of transportation systems, public facilities, and services existing or planned for the area affected by the use. We determined that the applicant did not need to submit a transportation study because it would generate about 1 extra trip per month, and that's just a maintenance worker coming to the site once per month to service the facility. Number 4, the proposed use will not alter the character of the surrounding area in a manner which substantially limits, precludes, or impairs the use of surrounding properties for the primary uses listed in the underlying zoning district. We determined that this proposed development is not going to alter the character in a way that impairs the surrounding properties. Number 5, the proposed use will not result in the use of land for any purpose which may create or cause to be created any public nuisance. According to the applicant, the gas regulator station does have a noise. If you're standing next to it, it does sound like a faucet running. But other than that, we were not able to determine any kind of nuisance associated with the proposed development. And number 6, the proposed use will be reasonably compatible with existing or planned neighboring uses based on review of the following. And again, we didn't find any reason to believe that the proposed use will be incompatible with any existing or planned neighboring uses. So with conditional uses, Planning Commission is allowed to require that the applicant, in some instances, go above what's required by the code in order to meet the intent of the code. So we have 3 recommendations as part of the conditional use permit. 1, we recommend that the applicant exceed the landscaping requirements found in 1792 and include a 10-foot landscape buffer between the back of the sidewalk on University Avenue and the proposed fence. 2nd, we recommend that the applicant install vertical metal fencing along with 4 stone pillars consisting of dressed fieldstone to provide elements of sandy style architecture. And we went with that because since the facility is not a building and therefore cannot conform to sandy style architecture, having that would in a way provide elements of the city's architectural style. And number 3, we recommend that the parking area be increased to at least 22 foot by 10 foot to account for the size of utility vehicles. And our interest there is to make sure that the sidewalk remains unblocked when there is a maintenance vehicle parked on the lot. We recommend that the Planning Commission approve the Type 3 conditional use permit, Type 3 special variance, and Type 3 design review associated with the Sandy Feeder reinforcement project, subject to those 3 conditions of approval, along with a few other conditions. But these are the ones that we have tied to the conditional use permit. So that's the 10-foot landscape buffer, the vertical metal fencing with 4 stone pillars, and the parking spot being increased to 22 foot by 10 foot to account for the size of the utility vehicles. So that's it for the staff report.
Yeah, and if I can just add real fast,
Yeah.
if you want to unshare your screen, there we go. So a few of the conditions, so making a more robust landscaping buffer and adding a more architectural fence with some stone were conditions that we just imposed on Fun Time RV, pretty close to the site. And they were imposed on Fun Time RV because Fun Time RV was also not proposing a building. And in lieu of proposing a building, staff had recommended and Planning Commission had decided that we would add some additional landscaping requirements, additional fence requirements, and some stonework along the fence. So to make this decision consistent with the decision with Fun Time RV, we decided that it would be best to recommend the conditions that Shelley just spoke about. So that's trying to tie the kind of the recommendations on 2 projects that were reviewed very recent, a project that was reviewed recently in the past to this project. And so those are some conditions we think are reasonable for this conditional use permit that's before you tonight.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to applicant's presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Crosby. This is Steve Walty, the land and risk manager for Northwest Natural. I had 3 guests here that are with me, and Kelly and Shelley would be familiar with them. We have both Andrea Kennel, who is our engineer, and our Brad Kirby, who is our senior planner, consultant. And we have Pete Daniels, who is another engineer, outside consultant. So just wanted to introduce that, and I'll stand back.
Can we get your address? Hold on one second. I'm having trouble here.
Happy to.
Yeah, your address, if you can go slow on it as well.
Be happy to. Northwest Natural Gas Company. The address is 250 Southwest Taylor Street, Taylor, Taylor Street in Portland, Oregon, 97204.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and we need your name and address as well.
Of course. My name is Brad Kilby. My address is 205 Southeast Spokane Street, Suite 200, Portland, Oregon, 97205. Or 202, I'm sorry. 97202. And again, my name is Brad Kilby. I'm a senior planner with Harper Hoff Peterson Regelis. We're a engineering and consulting firm in the Portland metro area, and we work all over the state and Southwest Washington. So as Shelley indicated, Northwest Natural is proposing to construct a natural gas regulator substation on approximately a 9,370 square foot lot. Natural gas is conveyed through pressurized distribution lines, and then it's decreased through those regulator stations so that it can be distributed to customers of the utility. This is the subject property, and our site actually goes back here, and that's being contested by the neighbor. But our site, when we designed our site, we were aware of that neighbor and the issues that we might run into. So we designed our building, or not our buildings, all of our site improvements to occur within a fenced area that would not impact those buildings. And we continue to work with that owner to either do a property line adjustment or remove the buildings, or we just don't know yet. That's still a point of negotiation. The site's located about 250 feet north of Highway 26, or I guess east of Highway 26, and it's largely undeveloped with volunteer shrubs and trees and gravel. It's fairly flat, and it's zone C2, retail commercial. It's been identified as a major public facility, which is a conditional use in that zone. We had to request a special variance to design standards in Chapter 1790, and none of the items listed in 1790 as being undesirable are proposed as part of the development. Impacts to the public systems are nominal, and offset by the fact that Northwest Natural will be constructing frontage improvements along the site's frontage, including sidewalk, planter strip, curb, gutter, and pavement. And I bring this to your attention because we're actually generating more than one traffic trip a month, because it's a trip to and from the facility, each counts as one, so that'd be like 2. But on average, it's well below 5, 6 vehicle trips a month, if that. We're not connecting to any sewer because there's no buildings there. There's no reason for a bathroom. This isn't going to be open to the public. The water that we're tapping into is solely for the purposes of irrigation for the landscaping. And then we will be providing storm facilities for any impervious surface that we have created, which is essentially the sidewalk and street that we're proposing. And I would say that our proposed parking stall is proposed to be made of pervious pavement, because we won't be using it that often, and it didn't make sense to have a lot of stormwater coming onto the site as a result of impervious area. To our knowledge, the only comment received was from the American Medical Services ambulance yard right across the street. They were concerned that there was be an issue if they were to respond during a major incident. And I would just say to that the natural gas industry is heavily regulated. As a utility, Northwest Natural is required to have rigid safety plans in place. Their employees are required to participate in mandatory safety training, and they are held accountable for any accidents by a variety of government agencies. It's very rare that any substation or anything, there are any major incidences here, and they're monitored very closely by Northwest Natural. Unfortunately, when they do happen, they tend to make the news because it's a gas facility that is there where there's an incident at, but it's very, very rare. There were no concerns raised from the other emergency service providers in the city of Sandy, including fire and police. Generally, we're in agreement with the staff report and the proposed conditions of approval, with the exception of conditions number 26 and 27. And I'll go into those a little bit more. And then further, we would like to clarify the right-of-way dedication called for in condition number 33. 26 and 27 are proposed by staff without a clear indication of the negative impact that they're intended to mitigate for. I understand, I just heard for the first time that this is because we're being compared to Fun Time RV. We're not really Fun Time RV, and we're actually off of the highway. And the fencing that we provided, along with the landscaping, would screen our facilities. As you can see, our facilities are relatively small, but it's important that we have an area inside that fenced area to maneuver vehicles and things during annual maintenance. So actually, I don't believe that there are any findings in the report to support the conditions, and I raise that just on behalf of Northwest Natural to cover any constitutional issues. So speaking specifically to condition number 26, it requires the applicant to increase the required landscaping buffer along University Avenue to 10 feet between the back of sidewalk along University and the proposed fence. Actually, doing so would fundamentally affect our ability to maneuver on site and be safe with our employees. We're already dedicating between 6.1 and 7.1 feet along University Avenue, and that includes a landscape planter strip, sidewalk, curb, and gutter, and then you have landscaping between the back of the sidewalk and fencing. So we, in our mind, are providing adequate landscaping. We're providing street trees along University Street, as well as a landscape screen along the fence line as well. If we were to meet this condition, we would have to push all of our facilities at the back. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some buildings at the back of our site that are currently in contention with the surrounding, with the adjacent neighbor. And being cognizant of that, we've made everything fit within our fence line. You might be aware of adverse possession, and we haven't got into any of those types of discussions with this owner, anything like that. But we wanted to be able to avoid having to have those discussions if possible, and make everything fit within our site as we were required to design under the underlying zoning dimensional requirements. So if we were to go back another 5 feet from where we are today, that's going to shorten the area inside the fence and would impact the ability for Northwest Natural's vehicles and employees to maneuver without impacting potentially their safety and the equipment inside that facility. We don't think that the property exaction of the additional 5 feet without an identified impact or findings or a rough proportionality analysis is constitutional. And we honestly feel that the number of trips that we're generating to the site are offset by the fact that we're actually proposing to dedicate and construct the half street improvements along University Avenue. So we would propose that the Planning Commission strike that condition altogether. Specific to condition number 27, it requires the installation of the vertical fence and 4 stone pillars along University Avenue. it would be expensive. And once the proposed landscaping is mature, those pillars would not be visible to the public. It doesn't mitigate an identified impact that has been raised by anyone and is not consistent with the fencing requirements of other nearby public facilities, such as a substation located along Mount Hood Highway at the intersection with Bluff Road. And I've got a picture of that right after here showing you. And that one, it's a galvanized chain link fence. It's an electrical substation, so their facilities clearly go above that. And they just have an arborvitae screen around it. And I show you that. I know that that was developed before this one, but I show you that because it just goes to show that if once our landscaping is mature, you wouldn't see the posts that staff are requesting that we construct as part of the fencing. As an alternative, if it truly is the chain link fencing that they're concerned about, and it doesn't sound like that's the issue, we would propose to replace the galvanized chain link fence with a black vinyl coated chain link fence that is less visible and would blend in better with the landscape. So although we're okay with the intent behind that condition, we're not actually okay with the condition as it's written because we think it's an unwarranted requirement. And then condition number 33 is a condition that calls for approximately 8 feet. And it was in quotes, and we're not too concerned about it because we're going to dedicate the required right of way. But I think we were showing 6.1 or 7.1. And we would just request that the 8-foot call out is clarified so that there's no expectation that we're required to dedicate 8 feet along that entire University Avenue. We're only required to dedicate the right of way to bring the street up to standard as we improve it. Here is the substation that I spoke about. And many of you, well, you may notice it because it's sticking above with the equipment that they have. Our equipment wouldn't be above the fence line. And then here are their arborvitae. And then we would have, where you see where the planter strip is behind the sidewalk, we would have additional street trees. I guess the street trees would be up here in the planter strip. Then we'd have additional trees and shrubs at the back screening the site. So we respectfully request that the Planning Commission approve the application with the staff recommended conditions as we propose to amend them above. Our team is available here to answer any questions that you might have. And I would thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to public testimony. And we will call for public testimony in 3 parts. First, we'll give opportunity for those who are in favor of the application. And then we will move to those who are not in favor. And then we will move to those who are neutral on it, but just have some comment that they want to make. So just as a reminder, for testimony, if you're participating online through the Zoom platform, click the raise hand button at the appropriate time, which is when I call in just a moment, and wait to be recognized. If you're on the telephone, just dial *9 to raise your hand at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized then. So we'll move to those who are in favor of the proposal. And as we've asked others, you've heard to give your name and your address for the record. So if you are in favor of the proposal, now is your time to raise your hand.
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. Then we'll move on to opponent testimony. If you're not in favor of the proposal, now is your time to raise your hand.
I do not see any hands raised.
And finally, if you have just a neutral testimony, just a comment to make, please raise your hand.
I do not see any hands raised.
All right. We will turn it back to Shelley for a recap.
Great. Again, I just want to reiterate that the conditions that we're recommending for this project are based on what we've conditioned other projects, including Funtime RV. And then we actually did receive one more public comment yesterday evening. I just want to make sure that that gets on the record. From someone who owns 2 townhomes near the project. They said that they believe it should be homes or apartments since there's a shortage of housing in the area. They're worried that the lot will eventually be unsightly. I'll make sure that the information about this public comment makes it to this final staff report. But I just wanted to make sure that that was on the record. Kelly, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I had a few things. In due respect to Mr. Kilby, because this application, and David can elaborate further on this, I'm sure, our city attorney, but because this condition has a variance request for basically waiving large chunks of our development code, and also because the request is a conditional use permit, as you are all aware, it's not subjected to the same clear and objective regulations that, say, a subdivision such as Bailey Meadows that you recently reviewed are. And because of this, there's some subjectivity that can be put in place, and there's additional conditions that you, if you feel are necessary or warranted, that you can put on the application. So, you know, the landscaping and the fence and the stonework is basically in lieu of having a building that's Sandy style, in lieu of having a civic space, in lieu of having additional landscaping on the site that would be consistent with a parking area. So basically what they're asking for is waiving the majority of our parking code, waiving the majority of 1790, the design standards, and therefore we're trying to get something that makes the site a little bit nicer looking from University Avenue. Especially as that area redevelops, we'd like the site to look as good as it can. So in all respect to their testimony, this is not a case where you are limited to just things that are in the code. When you see the conditional use section and you see the variances, as you're well aware of, because we get a lot of variance requests in Sandy, we can tie requirements to that variance request. We can tie additional requirements to the conditional use permit procedure. So I just want to be very clear. I don't know if David has anything additional to add to that.
Hi, can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, good evening. Yeah, just to follow up with Kelly's point, you know, obviously the fact that it's a conditional use does allow for an amount of discretion for the commission, as you've dealt with in the past. The only other thing I'd add too is just to the applicant's comments. I don't see these as exactions. I think that was the word that was used. There's not any property right that the applicant is giving up to the city. These are, as I read conditions 26 and 27 at least, requirements that would be happening on site to basically, as Kelly said, either you know, mitigate some and increase some screening requirements with respect to neighboring properties, or with respect to the fence, bring it in more in line with Chapter 90 and what would apply, generally speaking, to various improvements and the city's design standards. So there's not, this isn't requiring the applicant to, you know, give the city an easement or dedicate property, these two, 26 and 27. And it's not asking the applicant to go and improve, you know, public infrastructure. It's really to take the applicant's argument to its logical extreme. I guess we'd have a tough time, you know, having landscaping requirements at all, having design standards at all. Yeah, I'm not saying the request is totally unreasonable. I get, you know, the applicant's point in terms of what they're doing on the site, but my feeling is, given the fact that it is a conditional use, and that, as we all know pretty well, properties in this zone would be subject to pretty strict design standards. But to me, I don't see candidly the legal issues with 26 and 27, at least the way the applicant does. With respect to the condition that would be related to finding 33, I guess maybe in the rebuttal the applicant can clarify this, but I wasn't sure. The way that the finding reads right now, it says, as proposed, the applicant will dedicate approximately 8 feet of additional right-of-way. And I think ultimately the applicant is okay with that, but there was obviously some question and some concern about it. So I'm just not sure whether they have an objection to the to just the way the finding's written, or if there's something in substance there that they disagree with. So maybe in the rebuttal they can clarify that piece.
Yeah, there's something else I would like for them to clarify as well, is that during Mr. Kilby's statement, and I believe, Shelley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we got written correspondence in this regard last week as well, that they're saying that they need the remaining space on the site for vehicular movement. If that's the case, that area would also need to be paved because our code's very clear that you can't be driving on gravel surfaces. So we were a little bit confused by that because that was never mentioned previously. So I would also like some clarity on that as well. And I think that summarizes staff's summary there.
Okay, thank you. Applicant rebuttal opportunity.
Yes, thank you. We don't have an issue with condition number 33. We just wanted it, I guess a better way to word that condition would be the applicant would dedicate the additional right-of-way necessary to make the public street improvements along University Avenue without putting any type of dimension in there, because we're willing to do that, but it's not 8 feet. I think our survey shows between 6.1 and 7.1. And we just didn't want there to be an expectation that there's going to be 8 foot of right-of-way out there. To Mr. Duffman's comment about this being an exaction or not, it is actually, you're taking 5 additional feet of property from someone to landscape. It doesn't go to the city, it doesn't go to the county, but it's being impacted. It's 5 feet that's being impacted by that requirement. And if the city, I can just say this because I've been a planning director in other locations. I always told my planning commission, if I have a lot of variances coming in on a specific standard, then that's a standard that we need to visit as a community, right? So we don't have to do that. Maybe we need to adjust the regulation. But that 5 feet will affect our the ability, and I say maneuver equipment. There's going to be other equipment on that site that, like small tractors and things during the maintenance of that facility. I'm not entirely positive what all equipment's going to be there. There's going to be like maybe a trailer that's going to be providing generation or something during a time that they might have to shut down power to do other things on site. But it's not, when I say vehicle maneuvering, those vehicles could go in there and turn around and come back out onto the street without backing onto the facility. But for all intents and purposes, the only time that there's going to be any vehicle on site, it's going to be that maintenance vehicle that's parked on that impervious 10 by 22 space. And then if you're so inclined to agree with staff's requirement on the type of fence and the pillars, we would ask that you be cognizant of the fact that, again, it's going to be screened, and we could propose, putting the pillars on either end of the fence. If I don't understand why the 4, or again, I get it. I disagree. I get why they would be asking for it. I disagree with the logic that you can ask for whatever you want just because you're asking for a variance. Typically, when you ask for a variance, you're asking for the minimum relief necessary to get by out of that. We're not proposing buildings. We're not proposing a parking lot. So why are you asking us to mitigate for not proposing a building or a parking lot in that area? I get it. I understand. I would, and, you know, those are legitimate asks. I'm not trying to get on your staff for that. They're always trying to make the community better. But I'm weighing it from the side of the property owner. And, you know, having them increase their buffer width to 5 feet takes 5 feet of land that they would use otherwise for that facility and puts it into landscaping for the benefit, in this case, of the public, as staff has did.
Okay, anything else for applicant rebuttal? Can you? All right. We'll move into our discussion time now, and just for probably mostly for you, Brad, since you're familiar with the process where we would normally, or some would normally close the public hearing at this point, and once we do that, we can no longer talk to the applicant and get any dialogue going without reopening it. So our tradition has been to keep it open during our discussion, but only for the purpose of us asking a question of the applicant. So that's why we won't be closing it right now. It just keeps things running smoother should we want to get some information from you. With that said, somebody want to pick up the discussion with your thoughts, concerns?
I'll just throw in a couple things. I made a list, maybe just kind of cover them all. For Kelly, you know, just trying to jot down and clarify maybe your comment. You know, I looked at their diagram that there's several of them, but essentially they show basically a parking pad, and that parking pad's going to be gravel. From then looking at the site as it is right now, it's basically dirt. And I guess, are they proposing to leave all the rest of it dirt? They said they're going to maneuver on it. They're going to be in there, you know, et cetera. So as far as the code goes, you know, they are in C2, you know, and they are taking land that that the code would like to see a business on, an income generating business. But we're going to use it, you know, the plan is for something else. But the other thing is, I noticed with that, I appreciate Shelley mentioning, because mobile vehicles are 22 feet versus 20, but it appears the pad is inside the fenced area, which is kind of removed from the sidewalk. The reason for the extra 2 feet was to keep vehicles from extending onto the sidewalk. I don't see how they can extend on the sidewalk anyway, because if the fence is back, you know, 8 feet from the, you know, from the sidewalk anyway, I mean, I just don't see the connection there as far as the need for the extra 2 feet. So there's basically that. My opinion on the fence is, you know, the 4 pillars to me would be, as you know, Brad suggested, you know, you have 2 on each end, you have a gate, so the next 2 would probably be on each side of the gate. I mean, there's four pillars. Those in those locations would likely be visible from the road. They're not completely obscured by landscaping, because you got to, you know, you're not, you got to get in and out. I mean, it's going to be there. I would suggest we don't worry about Fun Time RV. I know Kelly wants to be consistent, but you know, and comparing to the PGE property, we developed our code, and the Sandy style has been around now for about 10 years. And I would suggest to the applicant, we don't get to where we want to go, which is what the code is asking for, by just repeating stuff we see in the past. We can find examples all over town that don't look like we would like to see them per the code. And if they were redeveloped, then they would be different. So pointing to the PG facility to me is, pointing to me as an example of something that we probably would not approve if it was applied today, and say that we should let you do the same thing. You know, that doesn't get us to where we want to go. So I'm kind of, you know, kind of pretty much okay with that. The only thing I'd like the applicant to just somewhat talk about he hit it a little bit on a point, and because you've seen places where there's been an explosion at a gas facility. So just as an education standpoint, yeah, we had one comment from AMR. Obviously, they're concerned. Nobody else did. But just so we better kind of understand what the probability is in that risk, because what Shelley showed from the picture at the initial, it looks pretty minimal. I mean, it looks pretty minimal on site. And even if I look at that diagram, where I look at the parking pad, they show their facilities, even if they stay inside those back buildings, only occupy half of the site. So, I'm arguing about 2 or 3 feet on the front and saying they can't maneuver vehicles in the back, to me, is kind of a stretch a little bit. There just seems to be a lot of maneuvering area back there. So personally, I'm okay with the recommendations that staff has provided at this point.
Mhm.
Other than the 22 feet, I'm not quite sure that makes any difference.
Shelley, Don's comment sparked a question in my mind. And when you asked for the 4 pillars for the fence, I immediately thought 4 corners. Were you thinking, as he described, 4 across the front, 2 that would separate the gate?
I can speak to that since I
Oh,
added it.
okay.
Exactly what Don described is what we were thinking, or what I was thinking. There'd be 1 at the corners, at the 50-foot corners, and then there'd be 1 on each side of the gate. So Don hit it right on. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I don't, Kelly, maybe further explain. The black vertical fence, it needs to be secure, and then leave it up to the applicant to decide what that is. We've required that type of fencing in different areas around town to be more attractive than a wall of wood fence, for example, or something that's completely a simple chain link fence. I mean, a good example that we wouldn't want to see on a street would be what you do see at the PG facility. So, having a more attractive fence on that front is fine. As far as going on the other 3 sides, having one which is, the black coated chain link fence, I think would be fine. I'm not sure if Kelly, if that's what you were thinking. I was only thinking of the side on University having those, the vertical fence, but I'm not sure if that was your recommendation, Kelly.
I mean, we never, in my 10 years of working in Sandy, we've never allowed on a project that involved a variance or a conditional use permit a galvanized chain link fence. So that was off the table from the get-go when we saw these plans. That's never been allowed. So at the very least, what we've required is a black coated chain link fence in the last 10 years. If you remember on Tractor Supply Store, because they asked for variances, we required that all the fencing on the site was the vertical steel fencing. And as you pointed out, we don't need to have applications play out exactly the same as past applications, because quasi-judicial hearings or processes allow that. We don't have to always be consistent, but I do feel it's important and necessary to be consistent where possible. And I think because the Funtime RV has a lot of overlaps with this project as far as not providing a building, I feel like we should be trying to be consistent with our requirements. So that's why I brought that up. I mean, you could do just vertical fencing on the front and do, black powder coated chain link on the other 3 sides. But my idea was just to have the vertical grooved fencing on all 4 sides, but that's really a planning commission decision if you want to require that or not.
Yeah, I was just looking at the view. I'm looking at the property, on the map, and you get back into, particularly the back one is a fence with some other property owner you'll never see unless you're the other property owner, probably.
I mean, it depends how well the landscaping survives. As we've seen a lot recently, as climate change occurs, the plant mortality rate in Sandy has really gone up. So if Northwest Natural continuously replants plants that die every year, because I'm assuming out of all the plants that they're planting, you're going to have a mortality rate. So there will be visible sections of the fences. it's really hard to keep all the landscaping alive. Just with all the projects we've seen over the last 10 years in Sandy, I can't think of but maybe a couple that have done it.
I'd like to just make a comment. I'm really familiar with that street. There's the Schuler building is right next door. There's a lot of businesses, small businesses in that building. That street is getting more and more housing development around in there. So even though we're talking commercial, the buildings, the land that abuts that space does have houses on it with yards, single family dwellings, and then just a very short street down that street are more housing that's going in. So I think it's really important that we do require the nicer fencing, because even the black coated chain link fence, I think that's going to be up against somebody's yard and very visible from the neighborhood. And the neighborhood is really getting nicer and nicer. So I support what Kelly was saying in terms of the vertical steel fencing.
Let me speak to the AMR thing also. Sorry, I forgot to bring this up in our recap. I mean, I personally kind of think AMR may or may not have a valid concern, but AMAR, as far as I'm aware, last time I checked, rents that building, and they have the ability to move locations if they have that much concern with the natural regulator station exploding, I guess. I don't really know what their concern is, but I just wanted to, I agree with the applicant that I don't think that's really a real concern. So that's all I want to say about that.
This is a curiosity thing. I mean, what we're doing here, I understand, and is reducing the pressure from just like a transformer does, upon electrical building. That's obviously being done right now somewhere in town. Is this replacing a facility that's already in town? Just out of curiosity, where is the current regulator, if you like, happening?
Are you, is that an official question to the applicant, Don, or is that for Kelly?
Well, I'll give it to Kelly, and I pass it on to the applicant,
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, so they would have to answer that.
So we have Andrea Kuhnel from Northwest
I'd like to
Natural.
hear that answer too, Chair.
Hi, I'm Andrea Canal, Northwest Natural. Same address as Steve Walty, for the record. Do you need me to repeat it?
I got it.
Okay. Thank you for taking the time to review this with us. There were a few safety questions and regulator questions, so I'll try to address those. We do have existing regulators along our existing pipeline that are located on the east side of US 26. There is one near the Ford station, suburban Ford in the right of way. There's another one near 362nd, one at Industrial, and one at the ODOT maintenance facility. So we have multiple of these regulators. The intent of the project is to build more capacity. So right now the pipeline is a 3-inch diameter main, and we are installing an 8-inch diameter main to be able to support that the current load in the current customers in City of Sandy. That 3-inch main was installed in 1965. So it's done a good job so far, but it's under capacity. So we're building a bigger pipeline to serve more gas, and then also adding another regulator. So these regulator stations are already operating and have been within the City of Sandy for quite some time. We are putting this regulator inside property because it's the end of the high pressure main, and the workspace we need is to be able to do our inspections of that pipeline that are required by the PUC and by PHMSA. So that's kind of it doesn't happen very. We do our monthly maintenance on the regulator. That's what will drive the trips, but we need the space to be able to do what we call inline inspection, which is the safest method to inspect the pipeline and make sure it's safe. So that's the safety. As to AMR's concern about any risks, are the biggest risk to our system is really third-party damage, people digging and hitting our pipelines that are buried. There's always a potential for something, but it's relatively low. These regulator stations are safe, and it could require maintenance, but we would be able to maintain one lane open if we needed to get crews in there to do any kind of maintenance or repair work.
Thank you. Other
Chair,
commissioners?
Chair,
Yes,
I had a
Rick.
couple questions for Kelly. Maybe I'm just confused a little bit. The pad inside the fence, is that gravel or will it be paved?
Shelley, can you elaborate on that? I think it's pervious asphalt. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's my understanding that it's pervious asphalt.
All right, thank you. And then I, like the others, I am supporting the 4 stone pillars on the face of the street for the look and feel of it. A question about the 10-foot buffer. Shelley, could you repeat the reason for that request again for me?
Kelly, could you speak to that since you were the one who put that?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I can speak to it. It's just trying, I mean, in all honesty, they're asking for, I understand what they're asking for, and that's why staff is supportive of granting the request. So I want to be very clear that we're supportive of the request. All that we're trying to do is make sure that the request affects the surrounding area as little as possible. And we just feel that a larger landscape buffer included with the nicer fence amenities will just provide the best amenity possible for that surrounding neighborhood. Especially as Hollis pointed out, it is rapidly redeveloping and it's becoming nicer every few years. So it's incrementally changing and we're just trying to create the best possible outcome.
Great, thank you for that. And then the last one was the parking lot expansion, 22 feet by 10. So Chair, my opinion on that is I'm kind of indifferent to that size. I just want to make sure there's enough capacity within for a large vehicle to enter and exit. It sounds like that's relatively close, so I would be supportive of that. The 10-foot buffer, I'm more in line with what the applicant said. I think if we're requiring the best fence and the stone pillars, that we're giving a good look and they're putting a landscape up that's gonna grow in time to cover it. I think the 5 feet might be a bit unnecessary because of the use of the land, but those are just my opinion, commissioners.
But one quick question to clarify, the applicant talked about 6.1 to 7.1. I'd like to be clear, at least what they're proposing. You know, if I just look at a site diagram, is what are they proposing to be the distance from the back of the sidewalk to the fence? Is that the 6.1 to 7.1? It seemed to me like it'd be one number. It would be, you know, it's just straight line.
Now that's the right-of-way dedication width. That's not the landscaping width, that's the right-of-way dedication width.
Okay, so dedication is 6.1 to 7.1 from is for the right of way. Is that from the inside of the sidewalk into the property?
Well, it would just be 6.1 to 7.1 feet of their existing property would be dedicated to the city of Sandy. My guess is that the roads have a slight skew, and that's why it varies by a foot. It's not like perfectly north-south.
Right. So is that then also part of the landscape buffer too? I mean, is that included in the 10 feet?
No, the landscape buffer would be an on-site amenity.
I mean, but you know, what I want to know, is there an overlap there?
Oh, there might be. I don't know.
I mean, because at the end of the day, I know they're concerned, but it seems to me like if the fence is 10 feet back from the edge of the sidewalk and 6.1 to 7.1 is dedicated to the city anyway, we're leaping over 3 feet here. on a lot that's 9,000 square feet, and I look at the whole depth of it, their concern is they want maneuvering room, and is 3 feet really the issue?
And Don, just from my point is, I'm under the understanding that that 10 feet is on top of the 6.1 to 7.1, not included with it. So we need clarification on that.
If you
That
look,
put the fence back 17 feet from the edge of the sidewalk.
That was my point.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out.
if you look at the site plan, it shows 5 feet. There's a call out with 2 arrows showing that distance, and that's from the property line to the fence.
Okay.
Staff's requesting that be increased to 10 feet. So it's the area outside of the dedicated right-of-way area. So there might be a little bit of area that it might be like 11 feet wide, and there might be a little bit of area that it might be 10 feet wide, and some area that it might be like 12 feet wide, depending on the right-of-way dedication. Because most likely from the back of sidewalk to the fence is going to be landscaping. I don't know what else they would fill it in with. So it's going to be a variable width because the dedication area is a variable width.
So at the end of the day, I guess I'm still dense on it. At the end of the day, if we adopt your suggestion on number 26, will the fence be somewhere between 10 and 11 feet back from the inside edge of the sidewalk?
10 or more feet. So I can't say it would be exactly 11 because the south portion of the property, the sidewalk jogs back to curb tight. So in that area, the landscape buffer would even be larger.
Yeah, well, that's
because part of that area is right away. So the landscaping would be 10 feet on their property, but there might be additional area within the right of way that is also landscaped.
Sure. So if the diagram with the call outs you mentioned is 5 feet, all we're doing is increasing that to 10 plus or minus plus, a little bit.
Correct.
My 2 cents for what it's worth is Northwest Natural's a great company. I mean, I couldn't run my company without them. I'm not real crazy every month when I write a check to them, but I'm happy they're there. And I think it's a great opportunity for a company such as Northwest Natural to provide the public with a view of them. Rarely nobody sees the lines underwater, or underground, or the other stations that are positioned around unless you're really looking for them. But I would hope that the things that we're asking for, the city's recommending that Northwest Natural would maybe embrace it a little bit more. I don't think the cost in terms of the whole project is going to be a huge factor to it, but the livability for everyone and workability within the city is going to be greatly enhanced by it. And I think it's just a real opportunity for, again, the company to kind of showcase who they are. And because again, other than turning on and seeing the gas or heater come on, we don't think about, we think about it if you're not there. So, and maybe another one is as Don says, a number is just a number, 5, 10, maybe it's 7.5, I don't know, to make it palatable, something in there. But again, I think that's what we're talking about. It's really more the livability within the city and just making it a nicer place to be within. And again, I'm just looking at the whole scope of it is, I think it's reasonable. Again, there's no building. That's what you're going to be looking at. And I agree with you that the vegetation is going to grow, but that's going to take I would say, 3-5 years before it fully fills in. And if something does die, as Kelly brought up, again, I would hope that again the applicant would embrace it a little bit more than I've heard. But anyway, that's my input.
Kelly, will the landscaping have a irrigation system required?
The code just says it has to be irrigated and has to sustain plant life. So typically since they're not going to have anybody on site to go out there every day with a watering can, I think they're, as Mr. Kilby pointed out, I think they're getting a water service so that there'll be an on-site irrigation system. Yeah, Jerry, if Mr. Kilby or Pete Daniels or Andrew, they have their hands raised. You guys, I'm not the one to say, they can talk or anything. So if you guys want to unmute them or allow them to speak, that's the commission's decision at this point.
Okay, thanks. I did have one thought that you raised, Kelly, about the standard for driving vehicles around inside, and that the standard was it would need to be paved. Can you or Shelley speak to that? Because was that new information to you tonight about there being equipment in there?
It was new information to me, unless Shelley already knew, but it was new information to me last week when we received an email from Northwest Natural stating that. So the information received tonight was consistent with the last written communication we received. But the code basically says the only vehicles that can maneuver on a site without a paved surface are vehicles without an engine. So if it was a trailer and they're going to pull the trailer farther onto the, like say they reverse onto the site with a large utility vehicle and the trailer that doesn't have a motor hangs beyond the pervious surface, we've always viewed it as that's fine. They can do that. But if they're driving like a motorized vehicle around on the site and maneuvering, that has to be paved. That's been the consistent interpretation the last 9 to 10 years.
Can we, Jerry, that might be a question to ask the applicant to just further define one, what is, the diagram simply leads you to believe you're going to park a pickup on a pad and that's the only thing that's going to happen. And they said other things are going to happen. So I think we need to know better what's going to happen, at least what is their vision of what the rest of that lot is going to look like. Forget what, not what Kelly said, but because right now I'm looking at it on Google, Google Street Map and it's dirt, and is it just going to stay dirt with a piece paved? That's kind of what the diagram shows.
So just to clarify, it can't be dirt. So it had to be some sort of, it would either have to be gravel, bark chips, rock, something that doesn't allow for stormwater to just kind of maneuver on the site. So it can't be dirt. It has to be covered with something, some sort of erosion control measure.
Okay. Other thoughts on that? Otherwise, I'm going to, if it's okay, direct one specific question to Brad on this issue. Is that okay with y'all?
Yeah.
Okay. Brad, my question is this. You're obviously, you have to be aware of our standard that if vehicles are on the property, they have to be on something that's paved. And you've told us that there will be other vehicles on the property for maintenance, to get up to it. What's your response to that code issue that requires that wherever those vehicles go on the site needs to be paved?
I would defer to Andrea or Pete because I'm not sure what the type of vehicles are. I would say that they are typically non-motorized vehicles. They're inspection vehicles, right? So the idea is that they're going to be able to come in with equipment that can telescope the lines and look and see what's going on in there. And I would just say, like, adding more impervious surface requires you to dedicate more land for stormwater quality, affects climate change. There's a lot to be said for that. And I would just hope that you guys are cognizant of the fact that you're not requiring a developer, regardless of Northwest Natural or somebody else, to pave an entire site just simply because you don't want people driving on gravel or rock. So I'll defer that to Andrea. I simply don't know Mr. Crosby.
Okay. Can neither Andrea or Pete give us, Pete?
Yes, Pete Daniels. Do you guys need my address for the record or?
Yes.
Okay, that's 15 West Eaton Road, Chico, California.
I didn't get that.
West 15th Eaton Road, Eaton Road in Chico, Chico, California, 95973.
Okay.
Right. As far as the site improvement, yeah, we plan on installing gravel across every part other than the proposed parking spot. And again, we really weren't that contentious about the parking spot. That's not an issue to us. We'd happily give you 22 feet instead of 20. That's not a big deal breaker for us. As far as maintenance, yeah, we would do, roughly monthly maintenance. The vehicle, just a crew truck, would park in the parking spot, and the individuals will walk over and deal with any reg issues that they need to, or inspections. Occasionally they may have to swing an outrigger out to get a boom over there if they've got to lift a reg out of place to replace it. But the other issue is, and one of the reasons why we don't want to give up that 5 feet, is that when we do go to do our inline inspection of that, it's a pretty large endeavor in there, and we usually bring in equipment on a 40-foot trailer. And so back in that 40-foot trailer in there and trying to be able to maneuver that, we don't want to give up that extra 5 feet, especially trying to back it in if that's part of the requirements, and not being able to have a motor vehicle on the gravel part of that. Again, we're probably going to have a boom truck in there once the trailer's parked, to be able to lift the pig out of the receiver after the inline inspection is done. But yeah, so just trying to be able to maneuver a 40-foot trailer in there and having a boom truck, be able to lift equipment in and out of there during the pigging operation, which is typically every 5 to 7 years. Having to pave for something as infrequent as that seems a bit excessive on our interpretation of this. But again, it's that 40-foot trailer, getting that in there is why we don't want to give up that 5 feet. So, and as far as the fence, I mean, if we need to put in the decorative columns, we're okay with that. I mean, our concern was those, if we did 2 on the corners, that would be fine. But the ones closer to the gate, we have concerns with. Again, it's a tight area in there. So if we have to back that trailer in there and still be able to get a piece of equipment by there, we're concerned that we end up having to remove a fence post, that every 5 to 7 years, to be able to get more room in there, put in some temporary fencing to be able to get that work done. So I don't know if hopefully I captured everything that Don wanted to know as far as what we would need to be doing in there. And said, I mean, we can come to a compromise on the fence. We understand that aesthetics are important. Said the 2 outside ones on the corners, by all means, if that helps move this along, we're okay with that. Our just concern is that, every 5 to 7 years, when we need to do our inspection to make sure that pipeline is safe and we don't cause any risk to the public, that we want to be able to get equipment in there to do the job right and have our crews work safely.
Thank you.
Gary, I give you a couple thoughts. I agree on they said they were going to put gravel there, and our code requires it to be paved. It seems to me like that, if they would just need to propose for variance. That just was missed. I personally have no problem with the area being gravel. I think of what we see inside of a normal electrical yard like PGE. The gravel, and get rid of all the vegetation, obviously from a fire standpoint. And so gravel, I think, is fine. But the point is that if they want to do that and the code requires paved, there needs to be a variance there, which I would be in favor of. Leave it to Kelly to talk about. The other one, without just second guessing, I'm looking at the map, and I'm just looking at arithmetic. The depth of the property is 125 feet. There's an issue on this back line that appears to be 25 feet. So in round numbers, it appears to be 100. And so if you're dealing with a 40-foot trailer, it seems to me like there's a lot of room to put a 40-foot trailer in there, even with the 5 feet. So I'm just looking at the diagram blown up on my other computer.
Commissioner, you might even argue that extra 5 feet gives them more swing radius when backing the trailer in on the drive.
So
just a thought.
I think Chris is right on that. The other one too is we're sitting here talking about something that the applicant has said it's every 5 to 7 years, typically on that. There could be something, I guess, in between. I guess I'm flipping around the other way of looking at what we're going to see for those 5 or 7 years every day. So, you know, you can move the pillars in, make the gate wider. I don't know. There's alternatives that can be looked at, but again, we're coming back to the same thing of something that's a very infrequent event, and we want to make it workable. And I think Don brought up a good point in terms of the variance for the gravel. I'm perfectly fine with that. That makes sense on it, but I don't know. It seems like we're not arguing, but just discussing the aesthetics over, which are very, very important over, you know, trying to get this thing moved along. But
Yeah, I mean, typically when we see a conditional use permit, just to remind everybody, a few of you have been on commission for a long time, much longer than I've worked here. So you've seen a lot of them over the years, but typically these are things that are exception to the typical use. So I just want to remind Northwest Natural, you're the ones making the exceptional request. We're in support of it. However, there seems to be a lot of reasons being given why things can't work. And I mean, if this site is so tight that providing an additional 5 feet of landscaping is going to basically make maneuvering and on-site delivery objects difficult, I kind of start to question, is this the correct site? I mean, that starts to kind of play into my mind of, is this the correct site that you're actually asking for a conditional use permit for? And as Hollis pointed out, this area is kind of being rehabbed, and we're seeing a lot of construction in it. So if we allow a regulator station on University, it's going to be there for probably all of our lifetimes. If the last gas line upgrade wasn't from 60 years ago, this is not going away anytime soon. So I just want to make sure that I think that the Planning Commission feels comfortable in granting the conditional use permit, that this site is going to be able to accommodate what's being proposed.
Well, I think, you know, maybe we may hear from any other commissioners that haven't really spoken and, you know, move along. That's my suggestion.
I think I'll just speak up. I don't like to necessarily reiterate what everybody's saying because a lot of it seems to be similar other than the buffer. I know Commissioner Mayton mentioned that he doesn't see the need necessarily for the 10-foot addition. I believe it's an addition, right? Or is it a total? There's a 5-foot buffer, then adding another 5 feet. Is that what it is? I'm a little confused on that part. I would tend to agree with that piece of it. As for the gate, or the 4 pillars, and just make the gate a little wider if you think you're going to bump into it. But there's going to be a fence there anyway, so that would be a hindrance every 5 to 7 years. So I don't see the difference whether it's a pillared fence or a fence. Other than that, I think, you know, the staff report is fine in my world, other than the 10-foot landscape buffer.
I think I'd echo Commissioner Logan about the pillars there. I think if you could design the gate wide enough to be able to back whatever equipment you need in there, and the gate ends up being wider, I'd certainly be supportive of just a wider driveway if that's what it takes to get something in and out of there. I wouldn't want them to have to construct, you know, an expensive landscaped gate and then have to tear it out every 5 to 7 years. But if you can design that driveway in a way that'll accommodate your need and build it in that location, I'd be supportive of that.
Question that I had on those pillars was we've been going on the assumption that the pillars would be at the corners and then at either side of the gate opening. And I've been looking at the the diagram here, trying to see that if it's possible that those 4 pillars were equally spaced out, and that the 2 center ones were not necessarily at the edge of, the swing point of a gate. The gate could be somewhere in the middle between 2 of the pillars. It looks to me that the driveway is not dead center. I don't know. That was just a thought that I had, was that, and then you could make that gate as wide as you wanted, because it wouldn't be contingent necessarily on the posts, or what will end up with those 4 posts will not be visually equally spaced. I don't know that that matters, but the thought came to me that they don't necessarily have to be at the swing point of the fence.
Yeah, I just looked at them. To me, if they were equally spaced, because of the way this is set up, I think they look kind of funny, because they would look stereotyped. If they were at each edge of the gate and at each corner, each one would be at a functional spot where you would expect something to be, So, and the other thing is that you want to see them. And I agree with the applicant, if you put them someplace and put landscaping in front of them, you don't see them, well, what's the point? So by putting them at those spots, you're putting them at places where they would be seen from the road, and hence you get the effect of that landscaping feature.
Mm-hmm. My only other thought, or one other thought, is I have seen 40-foot trailers backed into some pretty tight spots. So it's
Yeah, I'm
not,
just looking at the diagram. If these measurements are on the diagram are correct, it's seeming to me like there's a lot of room to put a 40-foot trailer right in the middle of this place. He's backing straight in, and it's 100, it's 100 feet, in depth, or just 90 to 100, depending on how much you could take off on the university side for the landscape.
okay. I made a note that there was also this mentioned by somebody, maybe even Kelly, about allowing for a different type of fence on the 3 sides as opposed to the front. I don't want that to be lost. So any comments on that?
Chair, I thought Hollis said we need to be cognizant of the neighbors, and the good fence should go all the way around is what her recommendation was. And I support Hollis in that effort.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing to just be aware of, on the south line, it doesn't look like the property line on the south line lines up exactly with the north side of the parking lot for the Schuler building, but essentially you're going to see that side. You're going to see the south side very visibly from the road and from the Schuler building. On the north side, there's property, and it's hard to tell what kind of a fence is already there. The street view on it shows a bunch of arborvitaes and some kind of potentially a fence behind it. So the point is they have to deal with a existing property owner there on some kind of a common fence on the north end. So that's something to be aware of. And on the back end of it, which would be the east side, that's where, if you actually look at the property lines, it looks a little goofy, because it looks like a lot to the very north of that has a little flag behind them with a building that probably it's a piece of another one, but that may be where the lot line adjustment is. I can see the 3 buildings they're talking about, and I can see the property line. This is on Portland maps. And they haven't explained to us what the issue is, but obviously those buildings belong to the property, or they don't. And if there's a lot line problem there, if they were built by somebody else and now they're on what's going to be PG's property, assuming they execute the purchase agreement from the Sandy Chainsaw, and that's all between them. I'm just saying, you know, I don't see us putting an expensive fence in a spot where nobody's going to see it. There's got to be a reason, and definitely on the west, on the south, that's definitely very, very visible. On the north, there's other property, so I don't know what the deal would be with that property owner. On the backside, I don't think anybody would ever see it.
So what are you saying in that you would not require the same fencing all around, or you're just throwing out ideas?
Well, you know, I mean, the idea of the black chain link fence on the west side, to be on the east side, which is the back end of the property, might make sense. I'm just looking at where it's at and what it's going to see and the purpose of it. On the north side, there's a property owner there, and I'm not sure what the whole deal would be with a fence from there. Normally, property owners have common fences. Definitely on the west and on the south, they're very visible from University, and I would suggest we'd want to have the nice fence there.
I personally
Was that John?
would just keep it all consistent and go along with, that is John, go along with Mike Walker's recommendation. The proposed chain link fence surrounding the site should be a black vinyl coated fence, powder black coated posts and rails. I just keep it consistent with that suggestion.
Yeah, I know Mike suggested that. I'm not in favor of that at all. I'm in favor of staff's suggestion for the nicer fence, at least on the west and the south, and then go from there.
And the
Yeah,
nicer fence.
and I would again make the argument that the neighborhood is getting nicer and nicer. Older, broken down homes have been torn down. Newer houses are going in at the very end of that street. There's several new homes going in, and that leads directly to the high school's track area. So that area really is getting nicer, and this is a utility type thing that's going to be there for years to come. And I think, you know, it's a conditional use. We should ask to have fencing and make it look as nice as possible. I see Brad keeps raising his hand, so I don't know, Jerry, if you want to acknowledge him, but that's all I had to say.
Before we do that, I agree with Hollis and John. I think it should be consistent all the way around. It's almost the other two neighbors on the north and the east are just as important as people driving by. I think it just tie it on all together.
Okay, go ahead, Brad, if you can do it quickly.
I can. Hopefully I'll save you guys the next 45-minute discussion. That's not a sword we want to fall on. So we'll be fine with the fence. We wanted to raise our concerns with those conditions. We fully understand, but we're fine with the fence. You don't need to discuss anymore. We'll put the fence all the way around, just like you've asked.
Thank you. See, there's a reason we keep it open.
So I guess the only other issue is being clear on what the on this right-of-way thing and the buffer on the west side.
Yeah, I'd say with the right-of-way width, I would just have a condition that says, I mean, Mike Walker doesn't attend these meetings, so, and he's on vacation right now anyway, so I can't even like text him. But I would just say the conditions should say something with a not to exceed of 8 feet of right-of-way dedication, a variable right-of-way dedication not to exceed 8 feet. Because I can't guarantee without talking to him that 7.1 feet will be, if you know, it could go beyond 7.1 feet, and I don't want to lock in a condition that if we need an extra half a foot beyond that wouldn't be allowed in the conditions list.
Okay.
But I also want the condition to be flexible so that if we don't need 8 feet, I don't want to take, you know, if it's 6 feet, then that's fine, and that's all we need.
Okay. That was the condition 33.
I believe so.
All right. Are we ready to move and close?
Yeah, I think so, Jerry. The only thing, if we're going to let this thing be gravelled, I'll leave it to Kelly or Shelley to jump in. But I think we can do this. We can add a variance in the meeting, right, David?
So, the way I think of conditional use permits, I mean, normally I would say no, that's something that the applicant, has to apply for. I think part of the issue with a conditional use permit is that as Kelly's talked about, as we talked about tonight, there is a significant amount of discretion in terms of how you're looking at the intent of various code provisions, et cetera. I think it would be I don't have any objection to the fact that if the commission wanted to look at that piece of the property and say, well, technically it may be something that would need to be paved, but in light of the way that the applicant has presented it, we would be okay with it being gravel. That's not a problem for me. I mean, if it were something that would be maybe outside of the context of a conditional use, I might feel otherwise and say, yeah, that would need to go through the formal variance process. But in this case, I think you'd have that discretion to make that call.
So staff just would need to maybe write a finding and a recommendation that we would approve. That the code says it needs to be paved, and that the recommendation is the gravel is okay, and that be part of our motion.
I think it could even be simpler than that. I think, the applicants proposed 20 feet of pervious surface. We've recommended 22. So whatever you guys decide as the length, I think you would just say that it needs to be that length, and that we recognize that a few times a year there might be trailers or other vehicles that might drive on the gravel surfacing.
Okay, so
they've said verbally that's going to be gravel. Is that written anywhere in their proposal?
Yeah, it's shown on the site plan.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the question I asked. There was impervious. They said in paved, right?
Pervious pavement.
Pervious pavement.
Pervious. It's like the stuff that it looks like asphalt, except it's a little bit different colored, and there's little you just can't put sand or anything with fine sediment because it'll clog the holes. But every like 10-15 years, just come back here. The high school has a bunch of them.
Boy, did everybody catch that good audio?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there, Kelly, but it sounded like you blew up.
That's why I wear headsets. So that doesn't happen.
I was going to say that the permeable is basically like asphalt. It just looks, the color is a little bit different, and it's porous. So you just don't want to get sand or dirt on there or anything, but the water goes through there and infiltrates into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
We have quite a bit of it around town.
Okay, can somebody close this before I forget?
I move we close public hearing.
I second it.
Been moved by Don, seconded by Chris to close the public hearing at 8:43. All in favor, wave your hand. Okay, I see those hands. The motion passes. We are closed. We can do further discussion. We have three things that we are looking at. It's a conditional use for a major public facility, a special variance to the issues on the design standards, and the, let me see, did I get that right? And then the design review. Three conditions were highlighted by the applicant, 26, 27, and 33. The extra landscape buffer, the fencing issue, and Kelly's, I believe, Kelly, that your recommended wording of not to exceed 8 feet, that was number 33, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Other comments, discussion, questions?
Now we're ready for a motion, Chair.
Yeah. You want to tackle it?
I'll try. Why not?
We'll make it a community effort.
So, Chair, I move to approve 20-015 variance for Sandy Feeder Reinforcement Project as per staff's recommendations for a 10-foot buffer, a vertical metal fencing surrounding the property with 4 pillars, 1 on either end and 2 surrounding the gate, and not more than 8 feet. I forgot the rest of that one. Help me now.
It's condition 33. We just change it to not to exceed 8 feet.
8 feet. And I think that's all 3 that we talked about for the last hour.
And David, did we need to say anything about the gravel, or was that just understood in our discussion?
I think it's fine in terms of the record reflecting your discussion, unless Kelly has any problems with that.
Yeah, I think it's important to, Chris, just take a glance at page 8 of 9 of the staff report. It has the conditions for approval. Those are the things you're kind of trying to get to in your motion, because they're the 22 feet versus the 20 foot for the length of the pad is in there.
So do you want me to repeat all 11 of those, or just
No,
the
just
3 that...
just that's a good way to say it. Just 1 through 11, unless there's any changes to them.
All right, then to continue, I recommend that we approve all conditions of approval 1 through 11, with the only change occurring to number 5, where staff recommends the parking spot be increased to 22 by 10 foot to account for all size utility vehicles, be modified to not more than 8 feet of distance.
No, that's the wrong
Is that
spot.
right?
No.
I guess I'm going to start all over then.
I
That's
think
30. Isn't that 33?
Yeah, but 33 is not a condition in the staff report. Stops at 11.
33 is the finding, and then there will be in bold a condition that's associated with that. Staff, can you? I don't have the decision right in front of me. Can you let them know which condition that is? It looks like it's.
Oh, I saw it. 1784.50.
Yeah, it's just the changing the wording in the finding. 33 is not a condition, it's a finding.
I understand. So approving the conditions 1 through 11, and then changing the finding to not more than 8 feet dedicated of additional right of way, and make improvements to the street to bring it in compliance with city standards. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you pretty much have everything that's is summarized in 1 through 11 that's in bold.
I'm still a rookie at this, I guess, Chair. I'm sorry.
No. This one was not an easy.
I'll second it. I think it was good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll third it.
We might need all 7.
Yeah, well, just to make sure we all understand, as usual, we're, accepting everything that they have in bold, in the staff report also.
Well, yeah, we agreed to based on the staff report and the findings of fact, so that would be in the motion. Okay, it was moved by Chris, seconded by Todd to approve 20-015. We will go with a roll call vote.
I just looked at my screen. I'm looking very dark on here.
I was just going to ask you if you could turn a light on, we could see you.
I know you can barely see me. Commissioner Carlton?
Yes.
Commissioner Lasowski?
Yes.
Commissioner McLean Wenzel?
She's muted.
Yeah, I saw it. Yes, I saw her, but we'll wait for her to unmute. Okay, yes. Commissioner Logan?
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley?
Yes.
Commissioner Mayton?
Yes.
And Chairman Crosby?
Yes. Motion carries.
Can we take a 5-minute recess?
Yeah, this next public hearing, can you, there was a change on what you wanted us to do tonight, Kelly, and between you and David, do we still go with the public hearing, or are we moving that off?
Yeah, we still need to go ahead with it. We noticed it for tonight, so we still need to proceed with the public hearing. My opinion of it too would be that we do not close the public hearing tonight, so that we can ask anybody that attends the August 24th meeting to comment as well, unless Mr. Duthman feels otherwise. But I don't see any issue in giving people an opportunity, even though there's no attendees left. I don't see giving an opportunity for public test, like bypassing an opportunity for public testimony tonight and again on August 24th. I think that would be safe to do it that way.
So we will, rather than close it, we will continue it.
That's what I would do.
Okay.
And then if we do a continuance, we don't have to renotice the next public hearing before the Planning Commission again as well, and like the paper and everything.
All right. And this one is a legislative one, so I have my, David, I have my older legislative order of conduct. I think will be fine.
Yeah, it's basically all you're really doing here, Chair, is you know, introducing the file number and then polling for any conflicts of interest or anybody that, you know, might have a feeling that they want to abstain, but you don't need to read through the litany of the script.
Oh, really? This one's got that whole center part. Cool.
Since it's legislative, the issues of ex parte contacts and site visits and bias aren't applicable. That's just for a quasi judicial.
But the big center section, read that too.
Since I don't have it in front of me, can you just give me a
Can you read that? I'll just go ahead and read it.
I'll get my magnifying glass. Yeah. Go ahead. That's fine. That's fine.
Well, let's jump into it. We will open the public hearing. This is at exactly 9 o'clock. And this is file number 20-023, code amendments. And I'll call for any abstentions from the hearing body. Nothing seen. Any conflict of interest? Or any challenges from anybody? Okay, here's the part I have in my old copy. If you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comment should state why the legislative amendment should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards.
Yeah, that one, that's we'll have to clean this up for you. I'm sorry, I thought we did. That's really relating to a quasi judicial application, and
okay.
So in this case, you're writing code, you're not applying it. So no need to read that.
Okay, just go to the staff report.
Yep.
That's easy. Staff report.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. So tonight we're looking at code modifications. They're all related to, well, essentially to try and prevent another Bailey Meadows and to try and introduce more clear and objective standards related to average daily traffic and traffic analyses. The changes are primarily in 1784 and 17100, but we did have to add some definition stuff as well. So 1710 came in. There's currently a lot of repetition between 1784 and 17100. We're not trying to address that at this time. We're really kind of trying to do an emergency code adoption here to, again, prevent another similar situation. So as I mentioned, the primary goal is to incorporate the average daily traffic standards into the development code. They're currently in our TS, but they're not in our development code. So if you remember from Bailey Meadows, when you have a needed housing application,
everything has to be clear and objective in order to apply it. Since it's not in our code in a clear and objective way, we couldn't legally apply it. So this is an attempt to get the ADT standards into the code in a clear and objective way, so that future subdivision applications would have to adhere to them as was intended by having them in our TSP in the first place. So just to kind of give a visual, to sort of remind you, you know, on the left there, you know, you have all of the vehicles on one access street. This is a diagram essentially of Bailey Meadows as was proposed, with Melissa Ave being the sole ingress egress. With the ADT standards, it would require, you know, the trips get spread out a little bit more potentially if they're going over the maximum ADT standard, then they would need to add another street or something. So this is sort of, you know, what happened recently, and it just distributes the traffic a little bit more evenly. So the main changes to the definition section, we're just adding a definition of average daily traffic. We're still working on that a little bit, but we have something in, we're probably removing the calculation piece that's in there currently, but the first couple of sentences may stay or they may get modified slightly, but it will be decided by some traffic engineers, namely Todd and John Ripplinger. We also added updated definitions of each street classification. So major arterial, collector, local street. So each has a different ADT standard. We added that to some of them. Right now it's added to most of them because our TSP had it, but we've been informed that really it's mostly key for local streets. So we're going to be kind of revisiting that based on the traffic engineer's recommendations as well. But the intent is to just get those in there clearly, in very clear language. In chapter 1784, which is our improvements required with development, we revised a standard related to cul-de-sacs to be more clear and objective. We also added clear and objective language related to transportation impact analyses. This was again to get this in the code because you need to do the transportation impact analysis in order to see if it's exceeding ADT or whatever other metrics. And we kind of adopted this code. We relied on the City of Bend, who recently did a code update regarding this in response to wanting to do clear and objective standards. And we just need to tweak that a little bit to make it more specific to Sandy. So again, we'll be working with the two transportation engineers on that as well to make it a little more applicable to our size of a city rather than Bend. And then chapter 17-100, so our land division chapter, we added that compliance with the ADT standards is a criteria for land division. So that pops up into 3 different sections. And then we added clarifying language that allows you as the Planning Commission to grant an extension of the tentative plat approval. If you recall, we've already had 2 this year where we've brought to you a subdivision that expired. Kelly was able to grant a 1-year extension, and this is just more explicitly allowing, the code's kind of silent currently on additional extensions. This is explicitly putting in that you as the Planning Commission could grant an additional extension of the tentative plat approval, which we would recommend if the code hadn't changed significantly in most cases. There's also some clarifying language added to the sections on street signs, street surfacing, and street lighting. This is mostly public work changes. And then similarly, more clarification on bonds and performance guarantee, which is again, public works. There are minor edits throughout. And so again, that's the end of the slideshow. We're not looking for a recommendation tonight. We're just looking for feedback. We will be continuing to work with the transportation engineers on kind of some of the more technical aspects moving forward, but just want some general feedback.
And I'd just like to add that David Doofman's been very involved in helping us look through these code edits and determine what is kind of needed at this time to make sure we have clear and objective standards, and trying to determine what is not needed at this time. So all the changes that we're adopting at this time, other than general housekeeping changes, are changes that we feel are needed to make sure that the code is clear and objective and that we won't have future transportation issues. similar to what we recently had.
Chair?
You want to add anything onto that, David?
If I may, just very briefly. So the challenge with this is that it's sort of, lawyers versus planners, and I don't mean that in any antagonistic way, but the pieces don't really fit that well, unfortunately. And we're going to get there, but obviously Kelly and Emily have sort of noted this all along from their perspective. And then, when Todd had reviewed the draft materials, he had some great comments. Your traffic engineer had some others as well, John Replinger. And what I mean by this is basically that, from where I'm sitting, I'm looking at this just solely from the point of view of the states imposed upon the city basically kind of two requirements. One, that certain standards that normally would be in a TSP effectively have to be in your code, and that's in this case the ADT standard. That's number one, and there's a lot of good reasons why we might just want that to stay in the TSP, but I think it's setting us up for an additional sort of technical argument down the road if we're not bringing that into the code. Number two is this issue of clear and objective standards, which I'm sure we're all quite sick of hearing about at this point. But the reality is, every time you get a housing application, that's something that an applicant could always raise as a basis to say, well, I don't think this particular standard is clear and objective, and so therefore you can't impose it on this application. And as I'm sure you might recognize, as we get into this a little bit more, whether that's tonight or whether that's more in detail next month, it's a real challenge. And the fact of the matter is again, there's really good planning reasons why you might not want some of these standards to be written in stone and written with these sort of like hard ceilings. But then again, it comes back to me and looking at it and just thinking it solely from the point of view of, well, what does the statute say? And what does the lawyer in me kind of look at how we'd be facing this argument again. And I really, have to advise that it be something that is, sort of set in stone ultimately. So that's just sort of a flavor. We had a conversation, we've had conversations about this internally, and then as I said, Todd had some really good observations, and we talked to him a little bit at the end of last week. And so we want to, make sure we're doing this right. We want to make sure we're getting it that as best we can, sort of satisfying, both those folks that are going to be subject to this code, those that are going to be working with it, and then, also feeling for myself anyway that it's legally defensible. But it's not easy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anything else staff-wise?
No, I think that summarizes it. Yeah, so just so you know, I will add one thing. So Todd's going to be pretty heavily involved in this. So you're going to kind of have a representative that's on the planning commission that's going to be heavily influencing how these code changes go. So I just want to let you know that you are going to have one of your peers looking at this very closely. The other thing that I wanted to remind you of, I think I don't want the meeting tonight to go too long, but at the same time, we have to be cognizant that the August meeting will have the Bull Run Terrace subdivision on it. Not to say that we can't continue this discussion or the Bull Run Terrace to another meeting as well. But that meeting will be probably the majority of it dedicated to the Bull Run Terrace subdivision. So I think if we have anything that's popped out to anybody or any big concerns, I would hope that we can discuss those tonight if we could.
Mm-hmm.
If it's helpful, I could give a little rundown. I sort of summarized my thoughts into like 5 points. There's a lot of detail there that we could get into the weeds in or not at this point, but maybe just to set up that conversation, I could share my thoughts if that's helpful to the group.
Please.
Jerry,
Let me just for order, let's give opportunity for public testimony. And if there's nobody in the room, we'll be past that and we can quickly get into our discussion. If that's okay, that'll just move us off that one thing. So we will
I
give
think you need to do it that way, Jerry. We need to keep our order.
Yep, at least somewhere. Okay, so now we'll have opportunity for public testimony. Unlike the previous public hearing, there's not a proponent-opponent neutral. We just look for public testimony on the proposed code changes. And also keep in mind that no recommendation will be coming out of tonight's portion of the hearing. It'll be continued till our August meeting, so there will also be opportunity at that meeting for public testimony. So that said, if you're on Zoom, to just raise your hand, you click the raise hand button. If you're on the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand, and you will be recognized. So now is the opportunity for public testimony. And as the others, if you are in the room and you want to make a comment, please give us your name and your address for the record. So Kelly will wait and watch.
Well, besides everybody that's on the screen right now, there are no attendees.
I see one, but yeah, that's it.
No, there's only staff, planning commission, and our attorney on the line. There's no other attendees right now.
Okay, well, a non-attendee can't give testimony, so we'll move on to our discussion then.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Staff doesn't have any recap either, just to get that in the minutes.
Yeah, one thing I would say to maybe Emily and even Todd and Kelly, if you see us getting our discussion and we're bogged down on something that you know is going to be looked at between now and the next meeting, would you kind of raise your hand and tell us that we may be wasting our time if it's going to change? But go ahead, Todd. Give us your
Sure.
5
Sure.
Are the mosquitoes bad?
They're not too bad. Some bugs flying around, but I don't think they're mosquitoes. That's the good news. It's getting dark though. Let's see. First, it has to do with the definition of ADT. Having a definition in there is essential for sure. My concern is just with the part of that definition that defines how you arrive at the number, because I think that's where the engineering comes into play. Some instances that's a pretty simple exercise, others it's really not. So I was going to recommend some language there or a different way. I guess just to back up, my plan here is to sort of wade through the details of that and recommend some language with the intent to make sure it's as functional as we can have it. The issue that David raised about having some clear and objective standards and still allow room for engineering, there's definitely some give and take there. So, but my thought was I just want to make sure what we have in the code is reasonable and practical, and that it'll work, in a practical application. So I'll write this up in a manner that's more useful for staff, but I thought maybe these points would help just sort of frame up the discussion tonight. So that's the one on ADT. The second would be, and Emily mentioned this, but not to set an upper bound of ADT for all functional classifications. Local streets are almost always the issue. Maybe collectors, but that's kind of iffy. But then once you get above that in the hierarchy, it's really it really just doesn't matter. And if you had a zone change or any an amendment to an adopted plan or anything that triggered the transportation planning rule, that exercise is already built into the TPR anyway about checking functional class. So I'd recommend taking out those or the task where you have to identify the ADT and check whether that's acceptable for those higher classification roadways. Let's see, the 1 mile radius that defines a study area is pretty large. That's like a 2 mile diameter, which is most of the town. So I think John Replinger recommended some changes to that to look at more at how many trips a development will add to an intersection rather than just a geographic boundary, which I agree with that. It's pretty easy to have the scope get much larger than it needs to be. And let's see, number 4, there's a section in there for the non-discretion track to have a 50 trip threshold for when a traffic study is required. That's for if it's a residential project. We talked some about this, but I'd recommend bringing that down. So if you had a subdivision for 50 houses, that would generate about 500 ADT, but we're talking about limiting ADT for local residential streets at 1,000. So you could get a project that doesn't have to do a traffic study that could eat up half of a local street ADT. So adjusting that downward, I think, would make sense in light of that. And lastly, number 5, and this is something that we didn't talk about previously, Kelly and David and Emily, but some provision for an ability to address safety issues even on small projects. Maybe it's not intersection capacity or ADT, but my concern is with the real prescriptive non-discretionary standards for residential projects, having something in there to address safety issues like sight distance, safe access for new street intersections, that kind of thing, I think would be advisable. And we can keep that clear and objective, but having that code written very clearly that you don't have to do anything, I think could be a liability for the city, just to make sure our bases are covered there with regard to safety. So those are the 5 things. Sorry, I know that's a lot there. Hopefully all that made sense, but those were my thoughts.
Okay. For the rest of you, if you look through and made any notes, how about if you share what your questions or concerns or notes were. I don't think we want to go through this page by page and edit by edit, but if you had questions.
Well, I'll kick it off with a few thoughts. It's clear, and I'm glad Kelly was right off the bat, mentioned, this is a reaction to Bailey Meadows. And I Yvonne and I both have had some discussions with Kelly that were concerned that, council wants something, and hence we just got to move it along. And so I really want to thank Kelly for letting us take a look at this. I know there's some urgency there, but I think it's more important that we get it right than to just get something out there. So I just want to know, Kelly, I appreciate that. Todd knows because I shared it with him. Towards the end of the Bailey Meadows, when the council was dealing with the appeal, all the testimony, to be honest with you, that was going on got under my skin. And what got under my skin wasn't the testimony; it was what I consider to be the use of numbers in an increasingly improper way to get an objective made that had nothing to do with the numbers. In other words, people didn't want to see something, and so they're going to find a reason. So I spent over 2 days becoming a practice transportation planner and appreciated Todd's work a lot. But I spent 2 full days. And for those of you who might have it, or if you want, I wrote an 8-page letter, my own, testifying on Bailey Meadows as a private citizen. In case you're bored, it's pages 1564 through 1571 of the final staff packet. I was going to, hopefully Kathleen's going to be on. I was going to suggest that's where she could find it if she's looking for it. But I'm glad to email one to you if you want. And I asked Todd to give me any comments. He hasn't. But what I want to say is I learned a lot by taking a couple of days and really diving into all his analysis that we just kind of take for granted. And a couple of my takeaways, and I'm a mathematician, a very objective person, as you know, that weren't really highlighted was there's a couple things I think we need to be really aware of. There's a standard here, the ITE standard. What's that? They're National Traffic Engineers, Todd, it's the Bible. And so, they believe that given some number, so you go in, you have the 100 houses, do arithmetic, boom, that's their number. So you write the standard on that number, and that's the first number that Todd uses and has to use when it comes out. Well, on Bailey Meadows, he also says they did their own traffic counts, and the actual traffic counts coming down Melissa were 73% of the ITE. So right off the bat, I want you to understand the difference between when you say 1,000 based on the ITE, that may have no reality to what's going on a given project or what's going on in Sandy. I bet nobody can tell us what the average trip counts are on the average residential street in the city of Sandy. Nobody knows. So we're looking at coming up and sticking numbers in code, and we don't even know what the current situation is in Sandy. All right. So you run the risk of when you put a number in to try and be quantitative and objective, to actually limiting somebody's ability to develop their property, or maybe allowing some that either way. But if you want to read kind of what I wrote, I mean, I put through a lot of numbers. That's one of the biggest things that I understood. So, you can make the argument that, I know what Todd did when he came up with the trap count with Gunderson, or excuse me, for Bailey Meadows. He doesn't have a real subdivision, so he has to use the ITE numbers. So then the trip counts in the report were a mixture of the ITE numbers. Did you have the ITE for Nicholas Glen plus the ITE for Bailey Meadows, or do you take the real numbers for Nicholas Glen and the ITE for Bailey? Or do you take the third option, which is, well, if 73% of the ITE is really going on in Nicholas Glen, you could assume 73% would go on in Bailey Meadows, right? Well, that generates big swings in those numbers. And, if you're a developer and you got 1,000, you're looking for 999, right? And if you're against it, you're looking for 1,001. And so you tend to get into this whole chase of numbers. And I think what it does, we have lots of numbers in our code, and then we have variances, deviations, adjustments. We have ways of kind of dealing with those. So my main concern initially was not with the housekeeping things or whatever, but when you put 16,000 in on a minor arterial and you put 10,000 in on a minor residential arterial, throw 6,000 in on a collector street, and we throw 1,000 in on local streets. You guys all know me. You know the next statement I'm going to make. I'm suspicious of any number that ends in a 0. So I'm suspicious of all those numbers that end in 3 zeros. They're ballpark numbers. We have no data that says those match reality in terms of what we really want, in terms of what are we inhibiting, or are we doing? I mean, we want Sandy to grow, and we want it to grow. It's going to grow, and we want it to grow in a good, logical way. Some of we actually bought a house. We didn't live. Our daughter lived on Melissa. We built the house. When it was being built, we bought it, and we rented it to her and her husband. So I'm very familiar with that neighborhood. And at the top of that street off of Rachel, there's those stubs that go straight to straight out to where Bailey Meadows is. Didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out the development was planned in that, going that direction, and that was going to connect through to Nicholas Glen. So you might ask a question where the Planning Commission and the council was when Nicholas Glen was built, because all the people down the hill probably had the same concern. But I also think when you look at the transportation plan, the logical thought was that everything from that area would go out off onto the highway, i.e. Gunderson, which is how we ended up with it. So I did all of these scenarios with and without Gunderson, with and without all the ITE versus that. So I have a whole bunch of different scenarios. So if you want to look at them, I'm glad to send it to you, but you're going to get some really interesting numbers. And you have to ask yourself the question is, if you end up with 1,200, is that a reason to deny something versus 1,000? And the last part, I guess I would say, what frustrated me was, remember, we conditioned Bailey Meadows that at the 30th house, they had to have Gunderson built, right? Remember, we talked about, having either an occupancy permit or a building permit. And I think we still settled an occupancy permit. But at the end of the day, there's only going to be 30 occupied homes until Gunderson was built, right? No analysis was done that said what Gunderson was going to be built. We knew Gunderson was going to be built, guys. We knew it's going to be built because we conditioned it. And if you look at it with only 30 houses, the impact on Melissa is actually less than 1,000. Because remember, a certain percent of those Nicholas Glen people are going out the other way. So, at 30 houses, you actually end up with less than 1,000 trip counts, you're going out. So what I'm just trying to say is I really got into a lot of the data, and you want to get into analysis paralysis and create a whole bunch of ammunition for folks to ball things up. Just put a whole bunch of numbers in there, and to make it worse, make sure they all end in 3 zeros, because I want to see us put in some numbers, but I leave it to Todd to jump in. I like those numbers to reflect reality in Sandy, as opposed to some average numbers that apply across some manual that all the transportation people use.
Yeah, that's why my first comment about the ADT and having a definition but not a prescription on how you arrive at the number. Because even in what appears to be a pretty simple thing where it's one street that serves a whole neighborhood can be more complicated, because like you said, we do have a lot of trip data for suburban communities, including Sandy, that show that it's significantly less than ITE rates. But that's where the engineering comes in. So that's why my comments were just to leave bandwidth for that engineering. And there are, national standards and recommended practices and stuff that talk about how to go about doing it. So I know once you take that objectivity out, it makes maybe the attorneys get nervous, no offense, David, that then there's maybe some discretionary things in there, but I think it's hard to divorce yourself entirely from the engineering part. So that's why my comments are sort of based around making sure there's still room in the code to do the engineering part.
Well, and my other thought would be making sure that there's room in the code. If we can allow for a 20% deviation for the percent of windows in some building or here or there, whatever, then there should be an opportunity to allow a 20% deviation for traffic counts in some way, because they're basically just numbers. And at least traffic counts, if you want to spend the money and the time, you could get a great database of, what are the traffic counts in Sandy? So you would actually build meaningful standards. Because what really frustrated me at the end on Bailey Meadows wasn't anything other than everything, everything turned into a maximum. And then it was the worst case. I mean, it was like the world was going to fall apart if you got to 1,001. Every kid on the block was going to get hit and smashed and taken him out of the hospital. I mean, so we spent a lot of time on this commission. That's why people come to us, because they want a variance or they want something, and we allowed some stuff. And So I wanted to see that same level of ability within these numbers, but I also would like to see the numbers reflect reality, because people are going to use them as a hammer. If they don't want something, if they don't want houses up there, they're going to figure out something to justify that. This got nothing to do with their objective. They're trying to find a hammer. Working 20 years for the Forest Service, I learned that from the environmentalists. They always find a way to keep you from cutting trees.
Okay, thanks. Somebody, Ron, was that you?
Yeah, I've got two main points. One is when I read through, and I did read through the Emily's paper, and it was very well put together. But when I came across and I see the other housekeeping amendments, those are the ones that kind of go back in and say, oh, what are those little things? Anyway, gone through all the fine details, and everything to me looks great. It's a lot of city capitalization, changing terms for people or titles, excuse me, just which all the different pieces made sense. You don't have to, but sometimes I'm just kind of curious why the changes to the performance guarantee, what that was trying to get at. Because I always like to know that, why are we doing this? You know, why are we looking to make these changes? And my other point was, when I talk about our planning commission, I really say we're really more planning review. That's what we typically do. And Dawn and I, talking with Kelly, are trying to figure out how can we be really more of a planning commission. And I think more importantly is how to aid the planning department within the city of Sandy. And if it's by code changes to it, great. Because what I'd like to see is, looking at the Bailey Mills from a slightly different point of view, is here's all the different disciplines within the city of Sandy coming up with a kind of set of interconnecting Legos, and you drop this thing in, and now I want to be connected to everything. And how does Kelly and his department effectively do that and plan out the next 20, 30 years of roads, et cetera? And ever since I've been in this town, it's always what's the quote, development pays for itself. Well, now we're set with Bailey Meadows of coming back and trying to figure out the other end where the development ends in some cases of how to do it. So anything we can do in my mind to help strengthen the code, change it, to let the planning department really get more out ahead of these developments so they connect better, so that the roads flow even better than they are, I'm all for. I don't know exactly what that is, but I take this as a step towards that. It's not really to thwart anybody that from coming in or doing it, but to make it more not accessible, but here's how, when you connect in with the rest of the city of Sandy, here's how we're going to do it, how we're going to judge it. So anyway, it's my little soapbox, but that's why I think really the crux of this is how do we get on the next few years down the road and get these code changes done so we can make it better. I'm done.
I'll jump in now, Chair, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I don't have a lot of technical, just more a couple comments. I like to tell Kelly and Emily and Shelley what a great job this report done, putting this together so quickly after such a contentious outcry from the citizens here in Sandy with Bailey Meadows. And I think you've done a fabulous job with it. While I'm not the technical expert that Todd is, or Don or Ron, they all mentioned some things that I had questions about, like the definition of ADT. Todd said that very well. I was concerned with kind of the narrowing ourselves into a corner by only allowing ourselves the ability to take measurement one way. I would like to say I'm a very pragmatic and data-driven leader. I'm in the production environment business for supply chain. So everything's about having parameters and measurements. And I really enjoy having mins and maxes on things and having that freedom range. I think that's what the variance is for, It's that if it doesn't meet that range, then they can apply for a variance, and that's what we're here to do, is to decide what we will and won't give. So I think having very clear and objectable standards is something that our code book needs, and I welcome it. So with that, I say thank you for the work that you've done, and I look forward to hearing the experts talk about what those numbers should be, as I'm just a novice in this game. Thank you.
Can I just give one point of clarification? Just like any quantitative measure within the development code, an applicant would be able to request an adjustment or a variance, just like percentage of windows, or just like any other, setback standard or anything with a number. Those adjustments and variances would still be applicable. So, for example, like Don pointed out, if you wanted to go from 1,000 ADT to 1,200, you could apply through a procedure with the city of Sandy, and we could evaluate it to determine if we want to grant it or not.
Okay, thanks.
I had just thought of one thing that I noticed going through, Todd. Maybe this, I think this may be for you. We have the ADT, and the ADT currently is defined as a 24-hour average, of which remember, the averages never happen. You're always above or below, and but then in the code, there's some requirements in certain situations for doing a peak traffic analysis. It defines 7 to 9 and like 4 to 6, something like that. So what's the role of doing a peak analysis if all of our standards are based on ADT? I would think that 1,000 cars a day, if you figure that out over a period of time, that may not be very much when you think about it. If you sit there on Melissa, you don't see cars going back and forth at all very much sometimes, and sometimes you do. So it's how those 1,000 trips occur that's more important than just the number, because the average doesn't mean anything. Remember, statistics, there's a standard deviation about any average. And is it tight? Is it wide? And when is it happening? It's way more complicated. And my concern is, unless we recognize that, and I think that's what Todd's getting to, allowing some flexibility for the engineering, we're going to have areas that we're going to say, wait, we put the urban growth boundary out here, we've made it SFR. Hey, we want you to build homes, but they can't because of the traffic part.
Yeah,
So,
they're kind of two different measures. So the peak hour parts really get to level of service, volume to capacity ratio, all those good metrics that deal with kind of the most congested periods of the day. And ADT, though, is not really about capacity per se, but more livability. So 1,000 vehicles per day on a residential street is granted a little arbitrary, but it's also sort of a threshold to define what's livable and what's not on a local residential street. So they're kind of two different considerations. So that's why we would measure them differently. So by rolling ADT into the development code this way, it sort of adds that to the menu of standards.
Thank you. As I look through them, just keep us moving here. I just picked up some observations, or not observations, a couple questions that I'll just pass on to staff to either answer tonight, or you don't have to. Like on the definition of the streets, I was just curious why our major and minor arterials don't have any width measurements. And I granted I understand this is the definition area, but as I just looked at it, there was the only two, they don't have widths to them, and that just made me kind of cock my head. On 1784-50 street requirements, which is page 3, down near the bottom of number 1, just as I was reading through this with that clear and objective hanging over my head. It's maybe about the 10th line up from the bottom. It says large projects shall assess all nearby key intersections. And it just made me wonder, what is nearby and what is key?
Within a mile.
And what is large?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
within a mile, everything is large and key.
So I'm just pointing out what I caught, which, you know, when we get further down the road, there may be somebody else will kind of cock their head at the same thing. I folded this page over and I don't see any note. Oh, it's on the backside. On page 10, streets generally, 17100.100, letter B, that first line, transportation impact studies commensurate with the scope of the development proposal. I don't know what that commensurate with. Is that a 1-to-1 ratio? Is it 2-to-1? What does commensurate with? And that's the new wording. Seems to me that that's a little bit subjective. The final one was just not the final one. The next one is on page 17. I learned something new in that what I've been calling blacktop all my life, I think I should have been calling it asphaltic concrete. Is that blacktop?
It is, yes.
All right, concrete. And just for technical things on page 19, at the bottom, required improvements, I got confused where A, drainage facilities was crossed out, and then the next one is A. So something had to be changed, or I don't think it was. See how the cross through and the colors and the changing is, something looks funny there.
Yeah, we moved it down to I think it's with the other utilities that are listed there. Before, it seemed really out of place, so that was the first one that was mentioned. So it was just a housekeeping change.
It went from drainage facilities to stormwater drainage facilities.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. No, what I'm saying is, though, just from your editing part, the next line below that starts with A, but that's not, and it implies that the original code, A, was lot, street, and perimeter.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
We'll have to take a closer look at that.
It's just a technical on how you're editing it.
Yeah.
Those were the kinds of things that my eyes picked up as looked over. And I do want to echo the kudos to staff for, this is about the quickest I think we've ever moved on changes that are in response to something in particular, and that's very commendable.
Can I ask a question of all the commissioners? And I realize there's probably another commissioner or two that hasn't spoken yet, but would it be helpful on a few of the sections that were changed by our public works director, such as the performance guarantee section and other areas that were pointed out by Mr. Lasowski, that if he provided some more detail why he's suggesting these changes at this time?
Absolutely.
Because between now and August 24th, I think Emily would need to get Mike to kind of flesh out why those changes he feels are necessary, because they were not made by anybody in this meeting. They were made by the works director. But yeah, we could ask him for further input if you guys want it.
I would like it.
I would say Emily,
I echo that.
Yeah, Emily probably knows where he provided input, and we don't. So maybe she could just go through those spots and make sure that there's input documented so that the questions can be answered, or he could participate in the next meeting, of course.
Well, even for him to, or for you to add text in that opening background paragraph, I mean, that was helpful to me to read. The primary goal of the amendment is to incorporate average daily traffic into the development code. And if there was just another little paragraph and that it further explained the changes that that Mike proposed, that would suffice it for me.
Yeah, I mean, we can ask him to elaborate more, like with a memo on why he feels some of the code changes that he's proposing are needed.
Yeah, what's triggered it in his mind and experience.
Because there's a good chance that city council will have those same questions. And I think if we just have that in a memo for both hearing bodies, I think that would be my preference.
Thank you.
You know, in fact, I guess that's what I'd support. That's what kind of Ron and I talked to Kelly a little bit about. You know, my vision of the planning commission would be that we take what staff has put together and we make a kind of a first cut on it. And so that when it gets to council, it's in much better shape. They have, I mean, good opinions, but you know, stuff that comes to us and we're expected to look at it one night and ship it on. What's the purpose? You know, if we aren't going to spend a little bit of time making it hopefully better for council. So taking the time to do it is good. I had one other quick one on Kelly on 178450, section B, which is pretty much all new. The very last one, which is 5B in that whole section there, it says the proposed development completed a transportation impact study at the time of annexation. In other words, you know, they don't need to do one when they want to do some building. If they've done one, it said at the time of annexation. What simply went through my mind is there could be a time lag there. It's possible that, you know, 5 or 7 years or whatever has gone on between the time they did that and then something happened and then they want to build. So I don't know if you wanted to put a time limit in there, because of it, if there is a lag. I know the thought is that they kind of go bang, 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 you know, and there isn't any, but it is possible.
Yeah, I would have to defer to David or Emily. They did a lot more of the heavy lifting on these code edits. So I think Emily took a lot of that language in the traffic analysis sections from Bend and then kind of worked with David to reduce the language. So I don't know, David or Emily, if you have any thoughts on that.
I think that might have been, I'm pretty sure it was something I added, maybe it was Emily's, but I'm pretty sure it was mine. My thought with it was basically that in light of the changes that the city made to the annexation standards, that there very well could be a requirement that study either be done at the time of annexation or through an agreement that the city could arrive at with the applicant. So, but Don's point's well taken. I mean, certainly we could have something that would, you know, set some sort of shelf life, or we could I think address that through some language so it wouldn't be stale.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Anybody else have comments that you're just dying to share tonight? Again, remember, we'll be looking at this again next month, but also we will have the other hearing that's anticipated to take a lot of time up against it. I don't know if you'd put this first or second, Kelly, but
Actually, I'd really like your input on where you guys would prefer to go.
Chair, quick question. Does the public get a chance to comment on it again at the next meeting?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, because we're just going to continue it. But now can we assume that what we would have to discuss next time will have some slightly different wording in places?
Oh yeah.
We won't. So it'll be redrafted. And yeah, we'll be.
But remember the revised code that you see next month will have a lot more editing done by the traffic experts that didn't have an opportunity to look at it before you saw it tonight. So I think it's only going to be improved from what you see tonight. It's going to be more and clear. We're hoping to make it more clear and objective.
So the essence will be the same, but just more defined.
Exactly.
One other thing I guess I learned, looking at the definitions, is the definition of a cul-de-sac. I guess my brain always had a cul-de-sac be the bulb at the end of a street, but it appears that we're defining any street that has, I don't care if it's got a bulb at the end or it's not got a bulb at the end, it's got one outlet. In other words, we redefined a dead-end street.
And only 20
Now we're
homes
calling
is
it a
400
cul-de-sac.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it would appear to be. It's a dead end street with up to 20 houses.
Well, what we're really saying is that you can't have, if you're going to have one outlet, you can't have more than 20 dwelling units in 400 feet. That's what we're really saying, regardless of what you call it. Which is our block length is the 400 feet kind of a thing. So anyway, I mean, it's fine. I just never thought of a cul-de-sac being more than the bulb.
it kept, for your point, it kept having a bulb at the opposite end. It keeps it there. So you still get
What if it doesn't have a bulb at the end? Is it
Yeah, I think if it's over 400 feet, then you have to provide sprinkler fire suppression systems for every single house, I believe, unless there's a fire truck turnaround. So we can take a closer look at it.
I would just say one thing, just to be clear on, we have streets that only have one outlet, but you stub the end, and that's because the end of that street is supposed to go into the next subdivision. You follow me? You got them over in Bornstead all the time. So you have a street, it's only got one outlet. It has no bulb at the end by design. So you have the same issue or the same problem. I mean, you follow me? So I'm kind of wondering what the bulb's got to do with it, because at the end of the day, any street that has only one outlet, seems like we have the 400 feet, which is fine. We already have that in other places in the code. Only 20 units is fine. But
to me, the bulb is just your turnaround point, which would separate it from a true dead end street, which would just be straight down, no turnaround point. That would not be a cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
that's my street, Chair.
Okay, I just want to say something quickly, because I'm not going to be able to stay much longer. I'm having really bad back issues and I keep moving positions, but I'm not going to be able to stay much longer. I wanted to just echo Chris's comments. I really appreciated how quick the turnaround was and what a good job the staff did. Emily and David in particular. I just found this to be very easy to read, and it was really clear what was changing. And I wanted to thank you for that. And I also wanted to thank Todd for your expertise and involvement in this as well. So, but I just, in addition to that, I took a bad fall the other day. I'm in a lot of pain, and I think I'm probably going to have to get out of here pretty soon.
Well, if there's not a whole lot more discussion, Hollis, we may be joining you in leaving.
But Jerry, going back to your question, my recommendation would be for the next meeting, we're continuing to leave this hearing open, is to do this at the front of the meeting. If we have the information sent out to us, which we will, read through the changes, I think we can move through it. I anticipate a long night, and then they have to know that we're going through everything, and then at the end of it, have one more. Plus, I think it's going to go reasonably quick, but you never know. Anyway,
yeah,
you're right.
I see your point, because
Just a more process question, Chair. Are the changes that we make to this, let's hypothetically assume they're approved at the next meeting, when do they take effect, or how long does it take from that time where we approve to the time they get implemented and affect applicants applying?
We're not
They
approving.
They
We
go
just
to,
did-
we
council.
send it on to council.
We're recommending
And
to council.
Council will do the approval on
Okay,
possibly the next meeting, and then there is a little bit of a waiting period before they are enacted.
okay. No, I'm just trying to get just general reference for my own knowledge. Thank you.
It's 30 days from the time council adopts it, typically.
Perfect.
Probably not till October. No, October, November, my guess.
Yeah, we're gonna try, if you guys decide to pass it along to them in August, then we'll bring it before them, most likely the second meeting in September. And then either they'll do both readings that night or it'll extend into October, yeah. And then it'll be 30 days from there. So yeah, Dawn's right, it'll be October, November before they're effective.
It took me, I know I'm slow, but it took me a while back, a number of years, to realize that all we can do is propose changes. But city council is the one that actually adopts them and enacts them. And in fact, they can make code changes without even asking us if they so deem to do so, right? Yeah. But I know they appreciate and value the input that we get. So.
Yeah, I can't recall a time where they've done that, but to answer your question directly, yes, they could.
I mean, if the code changes fall outside of the development code, typically, we did bring the 5G stuff before you guys, but typically we wouldn't bring other municipal code sections before you. Now, that being said, if we bring, I do want to bring dark sky changes and erosion grading and erosion control changes in the next few years, and I'm anticipating I'll bring them both before you because you look at those code sections when you make land use decisions. But typically we won't bring municipal code sections that aren't development code related before you.
Hollis, I think speaking for everybody, I hope you feel better.
Thanks.
Go to sleep.
Yeah, I messed myself up.
I make a motion to Hollis go. Anybody second?
Do you have any,
I second it.
do you guys have any questions or any ideas when you might get the next draft of this out, so just how much lead time we have to review it?
It's a great question. It's going to depend how quick Todd gets off his butt and no.
Yeah, Todd, quit camping out and get to work.
I mean, it is a really good question, Don. But it will depend on how fast we can get Todd and our traffic engineer, Repplinger, and then have David review all that as well to make sure that clear and objective is clarified. So I don't want to promise. It will definitely be a week before the meeting. That's what we're going to shoot for, but I can't. I mean, we'll shoot for a week before the meeting is what we'll shoot for. Try to get it by August 17th.
Okay. We need a motion to continue this to August 24.
Almost.
I'll second.
Okay, that was moved by Don, I think, seconded by Ron to continue this public hearing on August 24th, 2020. Let's go ahead and do a roll call vote, I think.
Okay. Am I unmuted? Yeah. Commissioner Carlton?
Yes.
Commissioner Lasowski?
Yes.
Commissioner McLean-Wenzel?
Yes.
Commissioner Logan?
Yes.
Commissioner Mayton?
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley?
Yes.
And Chairman Crosby?
Yes. Okay. Where'd my agenda? Where'd my agenda pages go?
While you're looking for that, Kelly, Jerry was, didn't have the right legislative thing. Could you guys make just a note in the next month if those two had been changed to send both he and I one? I'm in my code book. I have the order, but the old order. But just could ship those out, then we'd have them in our book since we're all meeting remotely all the time.
Yeah, I think David made new ones for the city council.
I have a new one for the quasi.
Okay, maybe I don't know. David, I think
I thought we did. Yeah, I just figured they got, it's basically just a cut and paste to make it with planning commission. So it'll be really easy to do. We can get that to you for sure next.
Yeah, well, I just, just in case Jerry doesn't chair, I have chair or something. I'd like to have both of those in my book. I have the old ones right now, but.
Yeah, we'll try to get them to you later this week or if you don't get anything by like next Monday, send me a quick email telling me to get to work and get it over to you guys. I'll try to get it done in the next couple of days so I don't forget.
If you got it for council, it should just be a document that you could forward.
Just a technology question. I'd like to get rid of my book. Do we have the code book digitally?
Oh yeah, it's digital.
That's
on the city website. Then you link.
All right.
Oh, yeah, please. I would love to have it digitally.
I mean, yeah, it's just the entire development code. It's one gigantic PDF.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
But it's a searchable PDF. I can make it searchable.
Yeah, definitely.
Is the one
That'd be great.
Okay, any items that anybody has for commissioners to staff, we will. If not, you know the routine.
I move we adjourn.
I second it.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, wave your hand or leave the room.
I'm sure Hollis will wave her hand.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Feel better, Hollis.
Motion carried at 10:04.